A young boy went to church with his mother. Midway through the service, the boy loudly said, "Mama, I have to pee." After taking him to the bathroom, his mother said, "It's rude to say pee in public like this. Next time in church, just say you have to whisper." The next week, the boy went to church with his father instead. As the service ended, the boy looked up at his father and said, "Daddy, I have to whisper." And the father said, "Well, okay. Just whisper in my ear." A woman goes to the doctor shouting and screaming in pain. "Please, doctor, you've got to help me. I've been stung by a bee." The doctor says, "Don't worry, I'll put some cream on it." The woman says, "You will never find that bee. It must be miles away by now." The doctor says, "No, you don't understand. I'll put some cream on the place you were stung." The woman says, "Oh, it happened in the garden where I was sitting under a tree." The doctor says, No, you idiot. I mean, on which part of your body did that bee sting?" The woman says, "On my finger. The bee stung me on my finger and it really hurts." The doctor says, "Which one?" The woman says, "How am I to know? All bees look the same to me." A husband entered the shower when his wife had just finished using it and left the bathroom. Suddenly the doorbell rang. The wife quickly wrapped herself in a towel and opened the door. A neighbour, Jack, was standing there. Seeing the woman, he said, "I'll give you $1,000 if you take off the towel." After thinking for 5 to 10 seconds, the woman took off the towel. The neighbour looked at her, gave her $1,000 and went on his way. The wife again wrapped the towel around herself and returned to the bathroom. "Who rang the bell?" the husband asked. "Jack, our neighbour," she replied. "Oh, great," the husband said. "Did he say anything about the $1,000 he owes me?" A 17-year-old male walks into a drugstore. He said, "I've been invited to Thanksgiving dinner at my girlfriend's house. Afterwards, I hope there is a chance I get lucky, you know what I mean?" The clerk says, "How about some condoms then? They come in handy. Here's a pack." The young man, after paying, walks to the door, stops, smiles, comes back. "You know what? The mom is also smoking hot. I think I'll take another pack in case I get extra lucky." Thanksgiving comes around. The mom asks the boy to lead the family in saying grace. So the boy complied and starts praying and praying and praying. After a while, the daughter leans over and quietly says to him, "I had no idea you were so religious." To which the boy replied, "I had no idea your dad was a pharmacist." A boy named George Gunderson did not do very well in school. His classmates ridiculed him every day, as did his teacher, Mrs. Jones. One day, Mrs. Gunderson went in to see Mrs. Jones to give her a piece of her mind. Mrs. Jones says, "George is the dumbest kid in the world." "My son is not dumb. He is a sweet and kind kid with plenty of potential." "He has no potential at all. He was born an idiot and will die an idiot." Some 30 years later, Mrs. Jones went to her doctor, who said, "You have a very rare disease. There is only one doctor in the whole country who can cure your disease. His name is Dr. Gunderson and he works in the Chicago hospital." So Mrs. Jones goes to Chicago hospital and Dr. Gunderson puts her on a life support machine. One day she asked him, "Dr. Gunderson, what is your first name?" Dr. Gunderson was about to answer when suddenly Mrs. Jones died. Dr. Gunderson saw that the janitor unplugged the life support machine so he could plug in his vacuum. He shook his head and said to the janitor, "You know, George, sometimes I can't believe you're my brother." There were two neighbours named George and Ted, and they both grew vegetable gardens. George's garden was growing beautifully, the tomatoes most of all. Ted's garden was growing horribly, the tomatoes most of all. One day, Ted asked George, "How do I make my tomatoes ripen?" "Maybe you should try doing what I did," said George. "You may remember that a few weeks ago my tomatoes were just as bad as yours." Then I remembered reading somewhere that all tomatoes are female, so I came up with a plan to ripen them. That night I went into my garden wearing nothing but my bathrobe, then dropped my robe in front of the tomatoes, hoping that they would blush at the sight of my naked body. Sure enough, the next morning my tomatoes were nice and red. "I'll give it a shot," said Ted. The next morning Ted looked at his vegetables. Then he turned to George and said, "I did what you did and I have some good news and bad news." The bad news is my tomatoes are still green. I'm sorry it didn't work. What's the good news? The cucumbers are much longer and harder now. A woman goes into a tattoo parlor and tells the tattoo artist, I want to get a tattoo of a turkey on my right thigh, just below the bikini line. I also want you to put Happy Thanksgiving below the turkey. So the guy does it and the woman is happy with how it comes out. The woman then says, put a Santa Claus with Merry Christmas on my left thigh. So the guy does it and the woman is happy with how it comes out. As the woman is about to leave, the tattoo artist says, if you don't mind, could you tell me why you had me put such unusual tattoos on your thighs? She says, I'm sick and tired of my husband complaining all the time that there's nothing good to eat between Thanksgiving and Christmas. A guy goes into a post office to apply for a job. The interviewer asks him, are you allergic to anything? He replies, yes, caffeine. I can't drink coffee. Okay, have you ever been in the military service? Yes, I was in Afghanistan for 1 tour. The interviewer says, that will give you 5 extra points towards employment. Then he asks, are you disabled in any way? Yes, a bomb exploded near me and I lost both my testicles. The interviewer says, okay, you've got enough points for me to hire you right now. Our normal hours are from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can start tomorrow at 10 a.m. and plan on starting at 10 a.m. every day. If the work hours are from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m, why don't you want me here until 10 a.m? This is a government job. For the first 2 hours we stand around drinking coffee and scratching our balls. No point you coming in for that. 3 Englishmen were in a bar and spotted an Irishman. So one of the Englishmen walked up to the Irishman and said, hey, I hear you're saying Patrick was a drunken loser. Oh really? Didn't know that, says the Irishman. Puzzled, the Englishman walks back to his buddies. I told him St. Patrick was a loser and he didn't care. The second Englishman remarked, you just don't know how to set him off. Watch and learn. So the second Englishman walked over to the Irishman and said, hey, I hear you're saying Patrick was lying, cheating, idiotic, low-life scum. Oh really? Didn't know that. Shocked beyond belief, the Englishman went back to his buddies. You're right, he's unshakable. The third Englishman remarked, boys, I'll really tick him off, just watch. So he walks over to the Irishman and says, I hear St. Patrick was an Englishman. Yeah, that's what your buddies were trying to tell me. Isaac stood at the door of the synagogue with an outstretched hand asking, donate a coin for charity? Donate a coin for charity? Then comes the rabbi. Hey Isaac, what are you doing? Isaac says, Rabbi, I'm raising money for a widow, mother of 3 little boys, who's 3 months behind in rent. If she doesn't pay $1,500 by the end of the day, she's going to be evicted by the landlord. The rabbi asks, Isaac, how much have you raised already? Isaac says, I've got $1,000, Rabbi. The rabbi says, all right then. This is a very important cause, helping a widow in need. I'll give you the remaining $500 so you can help her. Isaac says, wonderful, Rabbi. I thank you with all my heart, in the widow's name. The rabbi says, you have a big heart, Isaac. Tell me, is she a relative or something? Isaac says, no, Rabbi, she's my tenant.